Crash landing and initial survival. The celestial Voyager shuddered violently as it plummeted through the atmosphere of an unknown planet. Captain Sarah Chen gripped her command chair, knuckles white, as warning klaxons blared throughout the ship. "Status report," she barked, fighting to keep her voice steady. Lieutenant Ravi Sharma, hunched over his console, shouted back over the cacophony. "Main engines offline. Auxiliary power failing. We're going down hard, Captain." Sarah's mind raced. The celestial Voyager had been on a routine diplomatic mission to the Andromedan Confederation when they'd encountered an uncharted spatial anomaly. In the blink of an eye, they'd been hurled across the galaxy, systems failing as they were pulled into the gravity well of this mysterious world. "All hands, brace for impact," Sarah commanded, keying the ship-wide comm. She caught a glimpse of a verdant landscape rushing up to meet them through the view screen before squeezing her eyes shut. The impact was catastrophic. Metal screamed and tore as the celestial Voyager plowed into the alien soil. Sarah was thrown from her chair, her world dissolving into chaos and darkness. When she regained consciousness, the acrid smell of smoke filled her lungs. Sarah coughed, pushing herself up from the debris-strewn floor. The bridge was in ruins, sparks flying from shattered consoles. "Sound off," she called out, her voice hoarse. "Who's still with me?" Groans and weak responses came from around the room. Sarah did a quick head count. Only 5 of her 12 bridge crew were moving. She stumbled to Ravi's station, helping the dazed lieutenant to his feet. "We need to evacuate," Sarah said grimly. "This ship could blow at any moment. Help me get the others out." Together, they managed to drag their injured comrades from the wreckage. As they emerged into the alien sunlight, Sarah's heart sank. The celestial Voyager was a mangled hulk, torn nearly in half by the impact. Debris was scattered across a wide swath of what appeared to be a dense jungle. "Captain," a voice called out. Sarah turned to see Dr. Elara Tassoni, the ship's Asari xenobiologist, jogging towards them. The blue-skinned alien's normally elegant attire was torn and stained, but she appeared unharmed. "Thank the goddess you survived. We've been gathering survivors by the port escape pods." Sarah nodded, relief washing over her. "Lead the way, Doctor. We need to regroup and assess our situation." As they made their way around the wreckage, more survivors emerged from the jungle or clambered out of the ship's fractured hull. Sarah's spirits lifted with each familiar face, though her heart ached for those they'd lost. They reached a clearing where about 30 crew members had gathered. Sarah quickly took stock, a mix of humans and various alien species from across the galaxy. Many were injured, but their ship's medical officer, Dr. Zhang Liu, was already tending to the worst cases with what limited supplies he'd salvaged. "Attention, everyone," Sarah called out, climbing atop a fallen tree to address the group. "I know we're all shaken, but we need to focus on survival now. Our priority is to establish a secure base camp and take stock of our resources." She began delegating tasks, setting up shelters, gathering food and water, salvaging useful equipment from the wreck. As the crew dispersed to their assignments, Sarah pulled aside her senior staff for a strategy session. "Ravi, what's our communication status?" she asked. The lieutenant shook his head grimly. "Long-range comms are completely fried, Captain. We might be able to cobble together some short-range units from the wreckage, but contacting Earth or any of our allies is out of the question for now." Sarah turned to Dr. Tassoni. "Elara, what can you tell us about this planet?" The Asari frowned, her brow furrowed in concentration. "Preliminary scans show a nitrogen-oxygen atmosphere, similar to Earth but with higher oxygen content. Gravity is about 0.9 g. The flora appears to be carbon-based, but without my lab equipment, I can't determine if it's safe for consumption. We should exercise extreme caution." "Agree," Sarah nodded. "Dr. Liu, how are our medical supplies?" The doctor sighed, running a hand through his graying hair. We managed to salvage some basic first aid kits and a few more advanced tools, but we're woefully undersupplied for long-term survival. Many of our medications will run out within weeks. Sarah absorbed this information, her mind already formulating plans. All right, here's our immediate strategy. Ravi, I want you to focus on salvaging any tech that might help us signal for rescue. Ilara, work with our security team to assess potential threats, both flora and fauna. Dr. Liu, set up a triage center and start cataloging local plants for potential medicinal use. As her officers nodded and moved to their tasks, Sarah felt a tap on her shoulder. She turned to find Grok, the ship's Krogan chef, grinning at her with his massive, tooth-filled maw. "Don't worry about food, Captain," the hulking alien rumbled. "Grok can make a feast from anything. Just point me at the biggest, meanest beast on this rock, and I'll serve it up with a side of those weird purple fruits we found." Despite everything, Sarah found herself smiling. Grok's enthusiasm was infectious, and she was reminded once again of the incredible diversity and resilience of her crew. As the day wore on, Sarah worked alongside her people, hauling debris to construct makeshift shelters and helping Ravi salvage equipment from the less damaged sections of the ship. The alien sun beat down mercilessly, and strange bird-like creatures called from the dense jungle surrounding them. More than once, Sarah caught glimpses of shadowy shapes moving in the underbrush, setting her nerves on edge. As dusk approached, Grok made good on his promise. He'd managed to trap several rabbit-sized creatures, which he assured everyone was safe to eat based on his highly questionable taste test method. The meal was supplemented with various fruits and tubers that Dr. Taisoni had cautiously approved. Gathered around campfires, the survivors of the Celestial Voyager shared their meager feast. Sarah made a point to visit each group, offering words of encouragement and listening to concerns. She was impressed by their resilience. Humans and aliens alike were already adapting, forming bonds across species lines as they worked together to survive. Later that night, as most of the crew slept fitfully in their makeshift shelters, Sarah stood at the edge of their camp, gazing up at unfamiliar stars. The weight of command had never felt heavier, but she was determined to see her people through this crisis. A quiet footstep alerted her to someone's approach. She turned to see Zaravel Nar Raya, their young Quarian engineer, joining her. "Couldn't sleep, Captain?" Zara asked, her glowing eyes visible behind her environmental suit's faceplate. Sarah shook her head. "Too much on my mind. What about you?" "I've been working on modifying our short-range communicators," Zara explained. "I think I can boost the signal enough to reach orbit, in case any ships pass nearby. It's not much, but it's hope," Sarah finished, smiling warmly at the Quarian. "And that's exactly what we need right now. Good work, Zara." They stood in companionable silence for a moment, both lost in thought. Finally, Sarah spoke again, her voice low but determined. "We're going to make it, you know. However long it takes, whatever challenges this planet throws at us, we'll face them together, and one day we'll find our way home." Zara nodded, her posture straightening with renewed purpose. "I believe you, Captain, and I'm proud to be part of this crew." As a new day dawned on that alien world, Sarah Chen felt a glimmer of hope rising within her. They had survived the crash. They had food, water, and shelter. Most importantly, they had each other, a diverse group of incredible individuals from across the galaxy, united in their will to survive. Whatever this strange planet had in store for them, Sarah knew that the indomitable spirit of her crew would see them through. The real adventure, she realized, was only just beginning. Establishing a base and facing early challenges, as the alien sun rose on their fifth day stranded, Captain Sarah Chen surveyed the progress her crew had made. Their crash site had transformed from a chaotic debris field into a semblance of order. Makeshift shelters crafted from salvaged hull plating and local vegetation dotted the clearing, while a rudimentary palisade of sharpened logs encircled their perimeter. "Not bad for less than a week's work," Lieutenant Ravi Sharma remarked, joining Sarah on her morning rounds. Sarah nodded, allowing herself a small smile. Our people have been incredible, Ravi, but we can't rest on our laurels. What's our status? Ravi pulled out a battered datapad. Water supply is stable thanks to the purification system Zara rigged up. Food is manageable, but Grok's pushing to mount a major hunting expedition. Dr. Tassoni's identified several edible plant species, which helps. And our tech situation, Sarah pressed. Ravi's expression tightened. Not great. We've got short-range comms working, but nothing capable of interstellar transmission. Without specialized parts, a rescue beacon is out of the question. Sarah absorbed this, her mind already racing with contingencies. All right. Prioritize scavenging any intact computer cores or power cells from the wreck. Even if we can't call for help now, I want us ready to seize any opportunity that arises. As Ravi hurried off, Sarah made her way to the medical tent. Dr. Zhen Liu looked up from treating a Turian crewman with a nasty gash on his arm. Captain, he greeted her, his eyes wary but alert. What can I do for you? Just checking in, Doctor. How are our supplies holding up? Dr. Liu sighed, gesturing to his dwindling stock of medications. We're stretching everything as far as we can, but it's not sustainable. I've been working with Dr. Tassoni to identify local plants with medicinal properties, but it's slow going without proper lab equipment. Sarah laid a reassuring hand on his shoulder. You're doing great work, Jen. Keep it up, and let me know if there's anything you need. As she left the medical tent, a commotion near the edge of the camp caught her attention. She jolted over to find Grok, their Krogan chef, in a heated argument with Ilara Tassoni. I'm telling you, Blue, those big lizard cats are prime eating. Grok was saying, waving his massive arms for emphasis. We take down a couple of those, and we're set for weeks. Ilara shook her head emphatically. And I'm telling you, Grok, those lizard cats, as you call them, are apex predators. Hunting them without proper weapons or understanding their behavior is suicide. Enough. Sarah interjected, stepping between them. What's this about lizard cats? Ilara turned to her, frustration evident in her features. Captain, we've observed a species of large predatory quadrupeds in the surrounding jungle. They appear to be this ecosystem's dominant carnivore. Grok wants to hunt them, but it's far too risky. Bah, Grok snorted. Risk is just seasoning for the meat. But fine, if the science squid is too scared, I'll go alone. No one is going alone, Sarah said firmly. Grok, I appreciate your initiative, but Dr. Tassoni is right. We can't take unnecessary risks. However, she continued, seeing the Krogan's crestfallen expression, I agree that we need to expand our food sources. Work with Ilara to identify safer prey, and we'll organize a proper hunting party. Both aliens grudgingly agreed, and Sarah breathed a sigh of relief as they walked away, already discussing potential targets. Crisis averted for now. The rest of the day passed in a flurry of activity. Sarah split her time between coordinating salvage efforts, helping with construction, and mediating the occasional dispute. The diverse nature of her crew, normally a strength, sometimes led to cultural misunderstandings in their high-stress situation. As evening approached, Sarah called a meeting of her senior staff in what they'd begun calling the war room, really just a cleared space with a makeshift table fashioned from a piece of hull plating. All right, people, she began, looking around at the tired but determined faces of her officers. It's been nearly a week. I think it's time we face facts. Rescue may not be coming anytime soon. We need to start thinking long-term. A sobered silence fell over the group. Zara Vale, the young Quarian engineer, was the first to speak up. What exactly are you proposing, Captain? Sarah took a deep breath. I'm proposing we stop thinking of this as a temporary camp and start building a real settlement, something that can sustain us indefinitely if necessary. The implications of her words sank in. Ravi leaned forward, his brow furrowed. That's A big step, Captain. Are you sure? I'm sure we can't keep living hand-to-mouth, Sarah replied. We need proper structures, sustainable food sources, and a way to manufacture essential supplies. It's a huge undertaking, but I believe we're up to the challenge. Dr. Liu nodded slowly. I agree. From a medical standpoint, our current situation is untenable in the long run. We need stability. And from a security perspective, added Commander Vex, that Turian tactical officer, a more permanent settlement would be far easier to defend. Sarah felt a surge of pride as her officers began to brainstorm ideas, their initial shock giving way to determination and creativity. They outlined plans for more robust shelters, discussed crop cultivation, and debated the merits of various defensive strategies. As the meeting wound down, Sarah noticed Ilara had been uncharacteristically quiet. Dr. Tisoni, you have concerns. The Asari scientist hesitated before speaking. Not concerns exactly, Captain, but I've been analyzing some of the geological data we've gathered. There's something odd about this planet's mineral composition. I can't put my finger on it, but I have a feeling there's more to this world than meets the eye. Sarah raised an eyebrow. Could it be dangerous? I don't think so, Ilara replied, but it might be important. With your permission, I'd like to conduct a more thorough survey of the surrounding area. Granted, Sarah nodded, but take a security team with you. We still don't know all the dangers this place holds. As the meeting adjourned and her officers filed out, Sarah remained, staring at the crude map they'd sketched of their surroundings. She felt the weight of her decisions pressing down on her. They were no longer just surviving, they were laying the groundwork for a new life on this alien world. A gentle hand on her arm startled her from her thoughts. She looked up to see Zara Vale, the Quarian's glowing eyes conveying concern even through her mask. Are you all right, Captain? Zara asked softly. Sarah managed a tired smile. I'm fine, Zara. Just processing everything. Zara nodded understanding. For what it's worth, I think you're making the right call. My people know a thing or two about making a home in hostile environments. If you need any advice on sustainable systems, I'm here. Thanks, Zara, Sarah said, genuinely touched. I have a feeling I'll be taking you up on that offer sooner rather than later. As Zara left, Sarah took one last look at their crude map before stepping out into the alien twilight. The unfamiliar constellations twinkled overhead, a constant reminder of how far they were from home. But as she walked through their camp, their budding settlement, Sarah felt a renewed sense of purpose. They had survived the crash. They had weathered their first week on this strange world. Now, it was time to truly thrive. Whatever challenges lay ahead, Sarah knew that the ingenuity, resilience, and sheer determination of her crew would see them through. As she reached her shelter, Sarah paused, looking back at the bustling activity of their camp. Despite everything, a small smile played across her lips. They might be lost, but they were far from beaten. This world had no idea what it was in for, discovering the planet's secrets and alien encounters. 3 weeks had passed since the celestial voyager's crash landing, and the survivors' fledgling settlement was taking shape. Captain Sarah Chen stood atop a newly constructed watchtower, surveying their progress with a mix of pride and concern. Sturdy wooden structures had replaced the makeshift shelters, a small farm was sprouting its first crops, and the perimeter defenses looked significantly more formidable. Captain, Dr. Ilara Tassoni's excited voice crackled over the short-range comm. You need to see this. We've made a discovery. Sarah's heart raced as she climbed down from the tower. Ilara's geological survey had been ongoing for days, and the Asari scientist had been increasingly animated about her findings. She found Ilara at the edge of the camp, practically bouncing with excitement. The usually composed scientist was covered in dirt, her blue skin streaked with sweat. What have you found, Doctor? Sarah asked, her curiosity piqued. Ilara held up a small, iridescent crystal. This, Captain, it's unlike anything I've ever seen. The molecular structure is, Well, it's revolutionary. If I'm right, this crystal could be the key to faster-than-light communication. Sarah's eyes widened. Are you saying we could contact Earth? Potentially, Ilara nodded. But that's not all. These crystals seem to be scattered throughout the planet's crust. They're emanating a low-level energy field that's interfering with our scanners. That's why we couldn't detect them earlier. As the implications sank in, Sarah's mind raced with possibilities. All right, this is priority one. Assemble a team and... Her words were cut off by a shout from the watchtower. Captain, we've got movement in the jungle. Sarah sprinted back to the tower, scaling it swiftly. She snatched the binoculars from the lookout and peered into the dense foliage. At first, she saw nothing but swaying leaves and twisted vines. Then, a flash of movement caught her eye. Something was moving through the underbrush with deliberate, intelligent purpose. It wasn't the lumbering gait of the lizard cats or the scurrying of smaller prey. This was something else entirely. Sound the alert, Sarah ordered, her voice calm but firm. I want everyone at battle stations, but hold fire unless fired upon. As the camp burst into controlled chaos, Sarah descended the tower and gathered her senior staff. We may have first contact situation, she announced. I need everyone on their A-game. Commander Vex, the Turian tactical officer, stepped forward. Permission to take a recon team and intercept, Captain. Sarah shook her head. Negative, Commander. We don't know their capabilities or intentions. We hold our position and let them come to us. Non-threatening but ready for anything. The minutes ticked by with agonizing slowness. Sarah stood at the forefront of their defensive line, flanked by Vex and Ravi. She could feel the tension radiating from her crew, a mix of fear and anticipation. Finally, the foliage at the edge of the clearing began to part. Sarah held her breath as the first figure emerged. It was roughly humanoid, but that's where the similarities to any known species ended. Standing about 7 feet tall, its body was covered in a chitinous exoskeleton that shimmered with bioluminescent patterns. 4 arms emerged from its torso, each ending in 3-fingered hands. Its head was elongated, with large, multifaceted eyes that reflected the sunlight in a prismatic display. Behind the first came others, similar in appearance, but with subtle variations in size and coloration. Sarah counted 6 in total before they stopped, maintaining a cautious distance from the human settlement. For a long moment, neither group moved. The air was thick with tension, the only sound the soft chittering of the alien beings as they communicated among themselves. Sarah took a deep breath and stepped forward, her hands open in what she hoped was a universal gesture of peace. I am Captain Sarah Chen of the starship Celestial Voyager. We come in peace and mean you no harm. The aliens' chittering increased in volume and intensity. Then, to Sarah's amazement, one of them stepped forward and spoke. We understand, it said, the words heavily accented but unmistakably in English. I am Silos, speaker for the Harmony. We have observed you. Sarah's mind reeled. They could speak English? Had they been studying the camp? She pushed her questions aside, focusing on the diplomatic task at hand. We're honored to meet you, Silos, she said, bowing slightly. We crashed on your world and have been struggling to survive. We mean no intrusion or disrespect to your people. Silos's multifaceted eyes seemed to shimmer as it processed her words. No disrespect perceived. Curiosity, overwhelming. You are not of this world, yet you adapt. Fascinating. Over the next few hours, a tenuous dialogue was established. The beings called themselves the Axi-Thrai, and they had been native to this planet for millennia. They lived primarily underground in vast crystal caverns, which explained why the crash survivors hadn't encountered them earlier. As the initial tension eased, Sarah invited Silos and 2 other Sci-Fi representatives into the camp. The sight of aliens and humans mingling, cautiously attempting to communicate, filled her with a profound sense of awe. This was what space exploration was all about, the discovery of new life, new civilizations. Dr. Tsoni was practically beside herself with excitement as she showed the crystal she had found to Xylos. The alien's reaction was immediate and intense. "The hot stone," Xylos chittered, its bioluminescent patterns flashing rapidly. "Sacred, powerful, you've found." Ilara nodded enthusiastically. "Yes, we've detected deposits throughout the region. Can you tell us more about them?" As Xylos began to explain, using a mixture of broken English and gestures, Sarah pulled Ravi aside. "What do you make of this?" she asked her second-in-command. Ravi's expression was a mix of wonder and concern. "It's incredible, Captain. But if these crystals are as powerful as Dr. Tsoni believes, and as sacred to the Axi-Thrai as they seem, we might have stumbled into a very delicate situation." Sarah nodded grimly. "My thoughts exactly. We need these crystals if we want any hope of contacting Earth, but we can't risk alienating the only native allies we found." That conversation was interrupted by a commotion near the edge of the camp. Sarah rushed over to find Grok, their Krogan chef, in a tense standoff with one of the Axi-Thrai. "I'm telling you, Bug Eyes," Grok was saying, his voice a low growl, "those crystals are our ticket home. We're taking them, whether you like it or not." The Axi-Thrai's chitinous plates were flaring aggressively, its multiple arms raised in a threatening posture. Other crew members were gathering around, the atmosphere growing dangerously charged. "Grok," Sarah barked, inserting herself between the Krogan and the alien. "Stand down immediately." For a moment, she thought Grok might defy her order. But slowly, reluctantly, he stepped back. "This isn't over," he rumbled before stomping away. Sarah turned to the Axi-Thrai, bowing deeply. "I apologize for my crew members' behavior. Please understand, we're desperate to find a way home. But we have no intention of taking anything without your consent." The alien's posture relaxed slightly, but Sarah could sense its unease. She realized that the delicate peace they had established was balancing on a knife's edge. As the day wore on and discussions continued, Sarah found herself grappling with an impossible dilemma. The crystals represented their best hope for rescue, but using them could destroy their relationship with the Axi-Thrai. And underneath it all, a nagging question persisted. Why had the Axi-Thrai been watching them all this time without making contact? As the alien suns began to set, casting an otherworldly glow across the landscape, Sarah stood at the edge of the camp, lost in thought. The weight of command had never felt heavier. Every decision she made now would shape not just the fate of her crew, but potentially the future of human Axi-Thrai relations. Xylos approached, its bioluminescent patterns pulsing softly in the twilight. "Captain Sarah," it chittered, "your people are unexpected, troubling, yet intriguing." Sarah managed a tired smile. "I could say the same about yours, Xylos. I hope we can find a way to coexist peacefully." The alien was silent for a long moment, its multifaceted eyes reflecting the starlight. "There is much you do not know," it said finally, "about this world, about us, dangers and wonders." Before Sarah could press for more information, Xylos turned and rejoined its companions. As the Axi-Thrai departed into the jungle, Sarah was left with a growing sense that their adventure on this alien world was only just beginning. She gazed up at the unfamiliar stars, a mixture of hope and apprehension filling her heart. Whatever secrets this planet held, whatever challenges lay ahead, Sarah knew that the ingenuity and determination of her crew would be put to the ultimate test. The fate of the Celestial Voyager's survivors, and perhaps much more, hung in the balance. And as the alien night fell, Captain Sarah Chen steeled herself for the trials to come. Internal conflicts and leadership struggles, the discovery of that Axi-Thrai and the mysterious Heartstones had thrown the survivors' camp into a state of upheaval. 2 weeks had passed since first contact, and tensions were running high. Captain Sarah Chen sat in her makeshift office, rubbing her temples as she tried to make sense of the latest report from Dr. Tsoni. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. "Come in," she called. Lieutenant Ravi Sharma entered, his usually calm demeanor visibly strained. "Captain, we have a situation." Sarah sighed. "When don't we, Ravi? What is it this time?" "It's Grok," Ravi said, his voice tight. "He's organized a group. They're demanding we take the Heartstones by force if necessary. They're calling it ensuring human survival, but it's nothing short of theft and could destroy our relations with the Axi-Thrai," Sarah finished, standing up. "Where is he now?" "By the main fire pit. He's rallying supporters." Sarah strode out of her office, Ravi close behind. As they approached the center of the camp, she could hear Grok's booming voice. "Sitting on our salvation," the Krogan was shouting to a gathered crowd. "Those bug-eyed cave dwellers don't even use the crystals. They just hold them like superstitious primitives." A mix of cheers and uneasy murmurs rippled through the crowd. Sarah pushed her way to the front, locking eyes with Grok. "That's enough," she said, her voice carrying across the suddenly silent gathering. "Grok, you're undermining my authority and jeopardizing our entire mission." The Krogan turned to face her, his massive form towering over Sarah. "Your authority is keeping us stranded on this rock, Chen. We need action, not diplomacy." Sarah stood her ground, refusing to be intimidated. "What we need is to think beyond our immediate desires. The Axi-Thrai have knowledge and resources that could be crucial to our survival. Alienating them is not an option." "Bah," Grok spat. "We have weapons. We have numbers. We take what we need." A cheer went up from some of the crowd, and Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. She hadn't realized how far the discontent had spread. "Listen to yourselves." A new voice cut through the noise. Zara Vale, the young Quarian engineer, pushed to the front. "Have you forgotten everything Starfleet stands for? We're explorers, not conquerors." The crowd's mood shifted, uncertainty replacing the earlier bravado. Sarah seized the moment. "Zara's right," she said, her voice firm but empathetic. "I understand your frustration. Believe me, I feel it too. But we can't abandon our principles just because we're in a difficult situation. That's when they matter most." She turned, addressing the entire gathering. "I promise you, we are working tirelessly to find a way home. Dr. Tisami's research on the Heartstones is progressing. We're building stronger ties with the Axi-Thrai every day, but it takes time." The tension in the air slowly began to dissipate. Sarah could see the fight going out of many eyes, replaced by shame or resignation. But Grok wasn't finished. "Pretty words, Captain," he growled. "But words don't get us off this planet. I say we put it to a vote. New leadership, new direction." A shocked murmur ran through the crowd. Sarah felt as if she'd been punched in the gut, but she kept her expression neutral. "Is that what you all want?" she asked, looking around at the faces of her crew, human and alien alike. "To abandon everything we stand for?" The silence that followed was deafening. Then, slowly, Commander Vex stepped forward. The Turian's mandibles flared as he spoke. "I served under Captain Chen since this mission began," he said, his flanging voice carrying clearly. "She's led us through impossible odds. I, for one, still believe in her leadership." One by one, others began to voice their support. Dr. Liu, Ilara, Zara, even some who had initially seemed swayed by Grok's argument. Sarah felt a lump forming in her throat, overwhelmed by their loyalty. Grok looked around, realizing he'd lost his momentum. With a disgusted snort, he stomped away, followed by a handful of die-hard supporters. As the crowd dispersed, Sarah turned to Ravi. "Keep an eye on Grok and his faction. I don't want any surprises." Ravi nodded grimly. "Aye, Captain, and for what it's worth, I'm with you. Always have been." Sarah managed a tired smile. "Thanks, Ravi. That means more than you know." Over the next few days, Sarah worked tirelessly to rebuild trust and unity within the camp. She organized open forums to address concerns, increased transparency about their research progress, and even instituted a rotating council to give more voices a say in decision-making. But the incident had left its mark. There was an undercurrent of tension that hadn't existed before, a fragility to their community that worried Sarah deeply. A week after the confrontation, Sarah sat with her senior staff, discussing their next steps. The good news, Dr. Tissoni was saying, is that we've made significant progress in understanding the heartstones. With Axi-Thrai's help, we might be able to construct a long-range communication device within a month. And the bad news, Sarah prompted, sensing there was more. Ilara hesitated. The Axi-Thrai, they're becoming more secretive. They've restricted our access to certain K systems, and they're asking more questions about our technology. I can't shake the feeling they're not telling us everything. Commander Vex leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. Could they see us as a threat? It's possible, Zara chimed in. From their perspective, we're an unknown quantity with advanced technology. They might fear we'll try to take over. Sarah absorbed this, her mind racing. So we're caught between our own people's impatience and the Axi-Thrai's growing suspicion. Wonderful. Just then, Ravi burst into the room, out of breath. Captain, we've got a problem. Grok and his followers, they're gone, along with a significant cache of weapons. The room erupted into chaos as everyone began talking at once. Sarah raised her hand for silence, her expression grim. All right, here's what we're going to do, she said, her voice steady despite the turmoil in her gut. Ravi, organize search parties. I want them found before they can do any damage. Vex, double the guard on our heartstone samples. Zara, see if you can boost our short-range scanners to track them. As her officers rushed to carry out her orders, Sarah turned to Dr. Tissoni. Ilara, I need you to contact that Axi-Thrai. Warn them about Grok, but, diplomatically, we can't afford to panic them. Ilara nodded, hurrying out. Sarah was left alone, the weight of command pressing down on her more heavily than ever. She moved to the window, staring out at the alien landscape that had become their home. Somewhere out there, Grok and his followers were on the move, potentially jeopardizing everything they'd worked for. And beyond that, the Axi-Thrai with their enigmatic secrets and growing wariness. Sarah took a deep breath, steeling herself for what was to come. She'd faced Mutiny, crash-landed on an alien world, and made first contact with a new species. Whatever challenges lay ahead, she would meet them head-on. As she turned back to coordinate the search efforts, Sarah allowed herself a grim smile. Grok had no idea what he was in for. She hadn't survived this long by being easy to overthrow. The game had changed, the stakes higher than ever. But Captain Sarah Chen was ready. Her crew, her mission, and the fragile peace they built with the Axi-Thrai all hung in the balance. Failure was not an option. Major threat and uniting against a common enemy. The search for Grok and his renegade faction had been fruitless for days. Captain Sarah Chen paced anxiously in the command center, surrounded by her exhausted senior staff. The atmosphere was tense, with both human and alien crew members on edge. Suddenly, the ground beneath them trembled. At first, it was barely noticeable, but it quickly intensified into a violent shake that sent equipment crashing to the floor. Earthquake, Ravi shouted over the rumbling. Dr. Tissoni's eyes widened in horror. No, this is something else. The heartstones, they're reacting to something. As if on cue, a deafening screech filled the air, drowning out all other sounds. The shaking subsided, but an eerie glow began to emanate from the ground. Captain, Zara Vale burst into the room. You need to see this. They rushed outside to find the sky torn open by a massive, swirling vortex. Bolts of energy crackled across its surface, and through the center they could see something. Massive shapes, moving with ominous purpose. Before anyone could react, a group of Axi-Thrai emerged from the jungle, led by silos. The aliens' bioluminescent patterns were flashing in clear distress. The Ancient Ones return, silos chittered frantically. The devouring begins anew. Sarah's mind raced. Silos, what are you talking about? What's happening? As Silos explained, the horrifying truth became clear. The Heartstones weren't just crystals, they were part of an ancient defense system created to protect the planet from interdimensional invaders that appeared every few millennia. The Axi-Thrai were not just natives, but guardians, sworn to prevent the cataclysm. Grok, Sarah breathed, realization dawning. His theft of the Heartstones weakened the barrier. As if summoned by her words, Grok and his followers emerged from the tree line, their faces pale with shock. Captain, the Krogan rumbled, all bravado gone. I never meant for this. There was no time for recriminations. The vortex widened, and the first of the invaders began to descend, massive, amorphous creatures that defied description, radiating malevolence. Sarah's leadership instincts kicked into high gear. All right, listen up. This is no longer about us versus them. Grok, get your people in line. Silos, we need everything you know about fighting these things. Ravi, arm everyone who can hold a weapon. Zora, see if you can amplify the Heartstone's energy using our tech. As the crew scrambled to prepare, Sarah turned to Dr. Tissoni. Ilara, you're with me. We need to find a way to close that portal. What followed was a battle unlike anything they had ever faced. Human, alien, and Axi-Thrai fought side by side against the interdimensional horrors. Grok's brute strength proved invaluable, while Sci-Fi crystal technology merged with Federation science to create weapons capable of harming the invaders. Sarah and Ilara worked feverishly, combining the doctor's knowledge of the Heartstones with Sarah's tactical expertise. They realized that the crystals could be overcharged to create a feedback loop, collapsing the portal, but it would require someone to manually detonate them at the vortex edge. As Sarah prepared to volunteer for the suicide mission, Silos stepped forward. We began this vigil eons ago, the alien said solemnly. It is fitting we end it now. With a final, united push, they cleared a path for Silos. The Axi-Thrai, carrying the overcharged Heartstones, leaped into the vortex. There was a blinding flash, a sound like reality itself tearing, and then silence. The invaders dissolved into nothingness. The vortex collapsed in on itself and vanished. They had won, but at a terrible cost. Adaptation, growth, and potential rescue. In the days that followed the battle, a profound change came over the survivors' camp. The shared trauma and triumph had erased old divisions. Grok and his once rebellious faction worked tirelessly to rebuild, their earlier descent forgotten. That Axi-Thrai, their millennia-old purpose now fulfilled, began to emerge more fully from their subterranean homes. A true exchange of culture and knowledge blossomed between the two societies. 1 month after the invasion as the camp, now a true settlement, buzzed with activity, Sarah stood with Ravi and Ilara atop their highest watchtower. To think, Ravi mused, a year ago we were strangers on a diplomatic mission. Now look at us. Sarah nodded, a mix of emotions playing across her face. We've lost so much, but gained something incredible too. I just wish. She was cut off by a sudden crackle from her communicator. A voice, faint but unmistakable, came through. This is a Federation Starship Endeavour. We've detected your signal. Prepare for rescue operations. For a moment, they stood in stunned silence. Then, slowly, Sarah began to laugh. It started as a chuckle and grew until tears streamed down her face. Ravi and Ilara joined in, the release of a year's worth of tension and hope overwhelming them. As the realization of rescue spread through the settlement, Sarah found herself filled not just with joy, but with an unexpected reluctance. She looked out over the thriving community they'd built, at humans working alongside Axi-Thrai, at the alien yet now familiar landscape. Captain, Ilara said softly, sensing her thoughts. We don't have to leave. Not all of us, anyway. Sarah turned to her in surprise. What do you mean? We started something unique here, the Asari explained. A true collaboration between our peoples and the Axi-Thrai. It would be a shame to abandon it entirely. Ravi nodded enthusiastically. She's right. We could establish a permanent Federation outpost, continue our research, maintain diplomatic relations. As the Endeavour descended through the atmosphere, Sarah made her decision. They will accept rescue, resupply, and reinforcement. But this world, this accidental colony born of disaster and forged in unity against an incomprehensible threat, would endure. Captain Sarah Chen smiled as she prepared to greet her rescuers and break the surprising news. Their greatest adventure, it seemed, was only just beginning. The end.